Good morning. I'm Mike Moon. I represent the Missouri 29th Senatorial District, and I'm here to present Senate Bill 26. The primary premise of the bill is to remove a sunset that was placed on Senate Bill 49 2 years ago. And about that same time, there was a report that emerged from St. Louis involving allegations that an individual employed at Washington University in the medical clinic, and this particular individual, Jamie Reed, is here, I believe, today to offer some testimony. So I'm going to give her the majority of the time. And so I just want to make a few points, though. Senate Bill 26 is more than just a simple repeal of the Sunset on the SAFE Act. It also includes definitions for reproductive health care. With the recent passage of Amendment 3, there have been attempts to classify gender transition procedures as reproductive health care. And also in 26 it states, as used in the laws and regulations of this state, unless clearly and specifically stated otherwise, the term reproductive health care shall not be construed to include gender transition surgeries or the use of cross-sex hormones or puberty-blocking drugs for the purpose of gender transition. This definition is crucial because if there's an attempt to challenge the SAFE Act by arguing that gender transition procedures fall under the protection of reproductive health care, the courts will first refer to the constitutional definitions. And there's no constitutional definition of reproductive health care in existence today, so the courts will likely rely on the statutes to determine its meaning. So if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but I would also like to defer my time again to Jamie Reed.
Any questions for the senator? Seeing none, we will proceed. Can I get a raise of hands for those who are testifying in favor of Senate Bill 26? Can I get a raise of the hands for those here to testify against? Okay, so we're going to split the time. It's about 50-50, so we're going to split the time 15 minutes for both those in favor and those against. So can you keep that time? Okay, and if you're here to testify for multiple bills, we just ask that you keep your voice testimony for one bill, and the witness form's up here to testify in favor of all of the bills are up here. Just do that with a witness form and testify again by a voice witness for one. Yes.
Madam Chair, if I may, just when I saw the show of hands, I thought it was about 2 to 1 in terms of opposition and favor. So if we could just do a show of hands, if it is 50-50 to keep it the same, but I saw a lot more hands in opposition than in favor.
Even if we're going to keep it about 15 minutes on both sides, so if we do those in favor of 4, we're automatically going to go to those against. So they should get that time anyway. Does that make sense?
Okay, and then an ask I guess I would have is folks who aren't able to testify if we run out of time, is that if they submit written testimony that it is submitted to all members of the committee.
Yes.
As folks have traveled really far to be here for this today.
Of course, yeah.
Thank you.
We'd love to have this go on further, but we have there's a hearing after this, so we have a really short time for the room, so that's why we're having to limit testimony at all. So happy to do that though, of course. So, all right. We'll begin with our first witness in favor. Except for her.
Good morning. My name is Jamie Reed, and I hold a Master's of Science in Clinical Research. I am a lesbian, a Democrat, and the whistleblower from the Pediatric Gender Center in St. Louis, Missouri. So much of what you will hear today will involve perspective. One perspective is that the sunset should be removed and the restrictions allowed to continue. One perspective is that the sunset should be allowed to go into effect and these interventions allowed to restart in our state. How did we get to this point where so many people have such a different view? Some people testifying today are firmly on a train that I'm going to refer to as the trans train. They believe that this train is moving towards a beautiful future of utopian views of affirmation. Others of us have been standing alongside the train tracks seeing this go by. Very few of us have once been on this train and have been able to get off. I'm one of those people. Part of what the problem is that everyone on this train just sees this blur of us alongside the tracks, and they think that we are protesting them, thinking that our signs are saying hateful things and that we are screaming angrily at them. What we are truly doing is holding up signs saying that we care about you, we love you, we want you to be healthy and whole. And we are truly doing what we are trying to do is show you that there is research evidence to prove that this should not be a treatment given to children. We are not screaming out hatred. We are not screaming out anything but a warning to try to get you off of this train before it crashes. Please realize if you still are on this train, you are in a silo. The only information that is able to be gotten through is information that is highly controlled by the conductors, requiring you to stay on this train because their livelihoods and their paychecks require you to stay in your seats. Some of the parents you will hear today guided their own children onto this train and are terrified and see no way but to stay seated. We are screaming into this train. We are begging for those of you to trust us that if you jump, we will catch you. There were 3 distinctive pathways that I took to recognize this train was headed for destruction. The first one came when I realized that I would never bring my own children to the clinic for which I worked. That is a huge problem. I am a mom of 5 children. I did not trust the institution to care for my own children, and you should not trust these institutions either. First of all, there was an intense internal debate going on. Dr. Sarah Garwood, our adolescent medicine physician, believed that we were treating a mental health condition called gender dysphoria. She believed that it was a condition that could be adequately diagnosed and could be successfully treated through physical disruptions of the body. Dr. Chris Lewis, the co-director, did not share this view. He believed that we were treating an internal, authentic trans self that children could magically identify on their own. He believed that there was no need for a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, that there was no need for distress, and simply children could make this announcement one day on their own and that we should all believe them. What we now know is that Dr. Annalou DeVries, one of the creators of this concept, has now come to understand that there is no good medical evidence to support this gender dysphoria model. She now believes that children should simply have the right to change their physical bodies and that they should also have the right to experience profound adult regret. I simply do not believe that any state should support medicine that is about irreversibly changing children's bodies simply because they say that they want to. The second reason that I no longer trusted the center where I worked is because we were seeing detransitioning children. I struggle to explain to you how profound a detransition is, the impact that is rarely discussed and what testosterone can do to a human body. I was part of giving hundreds of young women testosterone as young as 13. I knew that the impact of testosterone on their bodies was going to be profound. But one thing that I didn't realize was that it also was going to forever impact their human voice. I now know so many detransitioners, and as soon as they speak, I can hear the pain in their voice that I have caused. But it's like being on that train. Some people who are on this train believe that they sound like a convincing male's voice. And now, all that I hear, now that I'm off of the train, is the vocal cords have been destroyed and unnatural pain. Sometimes our voice is the only power that we have. And to know that there are hundreds of young women now whose voices I have irreversibly destroyed is devastating. Those girls were the second reason I knew I had to get off the train. And the final element that allowed me to jump were the boys. This was the reason why this all began. It was this idea that we could somehow turn a boy into a girl and somehow turn a man into a woman. It is so presumptuous to believe that any of us would ever have this power. I saw boys who reached just in time to get their puberty blocked and then feminizing hormones. We used these powerful, powerful drugs to the point where their external appearance could be incredibly convincing. But what I heard from these patients in the privacy of that clinical space is that their internal disconnect was profound. We had taken children and told them a lie that they could become the other sex, and as they matured into adulthood, they came to the realization that they could never be a woman. Can you imagine being lied to by your parents, by your doctors, and all of these institutions around you about something so incredibly profound? They were not getting better. We could make them look the part, but we can never rectify or solve that internal sense of self. And you will see so many people here today make huge announcements about how this has saved their life. I can tell you from being on the inside that most of them in private will sometimes say only to their physicians or caseworkers like me that this is not a panacea and that they still hurt. Some of these parents will tell our local news that everything is wonderful and great, but what I can tell you from being on the inside is that they came to realize that they had lied to their children and that there is a reality that we can never change our sex. Sometimes the most courageous thing that we can do is tell people, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I participated in this. I'm sorry that I guided so many of you onto that train. I'm sorry for all the hurt that I have caused. But I'm proud as a Missourian to know that we have stopped this hurt. But I'm very sorry that there are still conductors in this room seeking to guide more children onto this train. I'm sorry that Promo still exists as an advocacy group, that it's still taking money from gays and lesbians. It should have closed its doors after Oberfeld. I'm sorry that Promo's leadership is in this room today, hurting people, hurting families, and continuing to lie. I'm sorry that my political party is still on this train. I'm sorry that NPR is still on this train and the New York Times. I'm sorry. We are going to continue to have more and more people line up along the side of this train and tell the people on it that we are here to catch you if you're ready to jump. I am here to tell everyone that there is nothing that any young person needs to change about their bodies, that they are perfect the way that they are. I jumped off that train 2 years ago, February 9th of 2023. I published my story in the Free Press, and not only did people, like those sitting amongst you, catch me, but one of the most important things that I've seen in this state is your Attorney General stood up, accepted my documents, did an investigation, and found what I said to be credible and true. Our state is the first state in this nation to have its SAFE Act upheld in a preliminary injunction. It is the first state in this nation to have a full trial on this evidence, and our state found the SAFE Act should stand. The safeguarding in the SAFE Act is one of the most profound pieces of legislation this state has ever put forward, and I beg you today to make sure that the sunset is removed. We in Missouri have been leading people off of this train. I am so immensely proud of the work that we have done in a bipartisan fashion. I am immensely proud to be a Missourian and a Midwesterner, and I'm here today to fight that the SAFE Act will be allowed to continue. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness?
Regardless of what side I'm on this issue, I just want to say you are one brave woman, and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions?
Just to clarify, are you a physician?
I hold a Master's of Science in Clinical Research Management. I run clinical research studies, and I've also worked as a case manager co-located in medical clinics for close to 20 years.
Okay, so not a physician.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Thank you so much for your testimony here today. Appreciate it. Next, in favor.
Good morning. Good
Morning.
morning, Chairman Carter, Vice Chairman Nicola, and committee members. I am a board-certified family physician specialist with almost 30 years of clinical experience. I am testifying in support of SB 26 on behalf of the physicians, families, and individuals whom I serve as Director of the American Academy of Medical Ethics for Missouri. Missouri legislators got it right a few years ago, as Jamie had mentioned, to pass this SAFE Act. It is a common sense law that acknowledges the biological reality of two human sexes, male and female. This bill is the appropriate safeguard to stop the indoctrination of gender ideology in our vulnerable youth. I became a doctor to provide help, to provide health, and to provide hope, not harm. This bill stops the harm done by the medicalization of trans-identified children and adolescents. Unless socially affirmed, did you know that desistance is the norm by adulthood about 85% of the time? So why would we prematurely and permanently medicalize a child for a condition that usually goes away? Many who regret undergoing gender transition claim their consent lacked information on transition's known risks and available alternatives. Studies downplaying rates of regret consistently show high rates of loss to follow-up, 20 to 60%, and set unreasonably strict definitions for regret. Regret rates come from gender clinics, precisely where regretters say they avoid. Decades of studies confirm that our trans-identified children and adolescents have an overwhelming likelihood of underlying mental health problems, adverse childhood experiences or traumas, family issues, higher rates of neurodevelopmental issues like autism spectrum disorder. All of these risk factors usually predate the onset of gender incongruence and gender dysphoria. A 2021 comprehensive data review of all 3,754 trans-identified adolescents in U.S. military families over 8.5 years showed that gender hormone treatment leads to increased risk, increased use of mental health services and psychiatric medications, and increased suicidal ideation and attempt or suicide. Missouri's trans-identified children and adolescents deserve better and safer care. They and their parents, guardians deserve a physician-led multidisciplinary care team that includes intensive psychological evaluation and counseling support first, until they reach the age of maturity, which usually is somewhere between 18 to 24 years of age. We don't let them drive, we don't let them drink, we don't let them drink alcohol, so why should we do this? In those age range, they can make a truly informed consent to undergo permanent and irreversible chemical or surgical castration. The medical organizations that promote medicalization with cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in our vulnerable children and adolescents over watchful waiting, mental health interventions, and psychological support do not represent me. In 2019, my colleague, Dr. James Cantor, discredited the American Academy of Pediatrics' seriously flawed policy on gender transition in minors. He called out the AAP's systematic exclusion and misrepresentation of entire literatures. The AAP misrepresented references that actually contradicted their transition policy. The AAP omitted advice about watchful waiting and the fact of desistance after puberty being the norm for gender dysphoria in minors. Pediatric endocrinologist and academic Dr. Paul Hrus in WashU, observes that pro-transition studies commonly share the same 6 fatal flaws. They lack randomized prospective trial design, small sample size, recruitment bias, short study duration, high subject dropout rates, and reliance on quote-unquote expert opinion. In 2017, the Endocrine Society Guidelines was the first from a medical organization to specify a disclaimer on their recommendation. It is buried in page 3,895, and it states, the guidelines cannot guarantee any specific outcome, nor do they establish a standard of care. In 2021, a British Medical Journal review gave these same guidelines a quality score of 1 out of 6, 6 being the best. In 2021, the British Medical Journal rated the World Professional Association of Transgender Health's standard of care number 7 with a quality score of 0 out of 6 because it contains no comprehensive literature review. Senate Bill 26 is a step in the right direction to promote human flourishing and protect Missouri's vulnerable youth from preventable, regret, and irreversible harm. Thank you. I welcome your questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your time. Where are we at? Do we have any more time in favor? Okay, we're going to do one more in favor. It needs to be 2 minutes or less.
Okay, I'm going to make this as fast as possible. My name is Chris Parrott. I'm a proud Missourian. I'm also a homosexual man. And this may surprise you, but over the past few years, I've been traveling throughout this great state, fighting radical LGBTQIA+ doctrine. You may ask why a homosexual man would do this. It's because I'm specifically opposed to gender ideology, the ideology that underlies many of the things I fight against. That is the reason I'm here to support Senator Moon's SB 26, which would make Missouri's ban on child sex changes permanent. As a homosexual man and a decent human, I have to oppose attempts at child sex changes. This specifically affects young people who will probably just turn out to be homosexuals like me. I know from personal experience how confusing it can be to be a young gay person. We look at the world around us and see most people behaving differently than we do. When I was an adolescent, I saw other boys starting to like girls. I didn't feel that way. When I was younger, I dressed up in girls' clothes and played with Barbie dolls. All of this did make me question what kind of boy I was and whether I should or not be a boy. When I was young, I easily could have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. It turns out that's not uncommon for people like me. In fact, it's very easy to find studies that show the vast majority of youth that experience gender dysphoria will simply turn out to be homosexual or bisexual adults. But these attempts by the transgender movement and their supporters to change us is simply conversion therapy 2.0. Homosexuals rejected attempts at conversion when certain religious people tried to do it. We must reject this even more extreme version of conversion therapy. When a kid has gender confusion, let them grow out of it. Most do, and when they do, they'll probably just be gay. Gay people are just fine as they are. Pediatric transgender medicine, and indeed the entire transgender movement, is inherently homophobic. That's why I reject it. We don't need to be fixed, and no child, whether they turn out to be homosexual or heterosexual, is capable of making such a life-altering decision as going through a sex change. The only reason they are encouraged to do this is because of a greedy medical industry and parents who have been misguided by that greedy medical industry. It's time to end this disgusting and homophobic practice once and for all. Senator Moon, you have my full support. In the end, just leave kids alone. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your time. All right, we're going to transition now to those in opposition, 15 minutes. First testimony in opposition.
Thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to give testimony today. My name is Dr. Michael Donovan, and I'm a primary care physician in St. Louis. I'm speaking today as a representative of Southampton Community Healthcare, where I've worked for the last 3 years. I trained in family medicine at St. Louis University and have been a practicing physician in St. Louis for 9 years. I am so lucky to practice family medicine because in my specialty, we're trained to treat both children and adults, the whole family. During my career, I've had the honor of taking care of hundreds of transgender patients from all walks of life, and each patient has been unique and required individualized care plans for not only gender dysphoria, but also all other health issues that we manage in primary care. I became a physician to be able to form a bond of trust with patients and to help them through some of the most difficult challenges in their lives. My trans patients are such a joy to me, and they teach me lessons in bravery and resilience. But many suffer high rates of depression and anxiety when they cannot live freely as themselves. I've personally witnessed the life-saving nature of providing gender-affirming care to trans patients. And this often includes puberty blockers and hormone medication. But the decision to use medication is a decision we come to over the course of time, caring for the patient and getting to know them and their medical conditions. We go through a process of informed consent with the patient and their parents. When I have thoroughly evaluated a patient and I know the medication is appropriate for them, and the patient tells me over time that they need it, and the parents give consent, and mental health care providers also agree, then, and only then, medicine like puberty blockers and hormone therapy are utilized and are absolutely life-saving. Notice that I did not mention surgery because we do not refer patients under 18 for surgery. I think back over the years, and many of the patients that still remind me why I became a physician are my trans patients, because I can see the dramatic improvement in their health when they have access to guideline-supported treatment. I've seen patients suffering with depression, anxiety, thoughts of harming themselves, and even the sensation of physical pain and discomfort in their body, who, after they are able to take hormone medicine, improve in all these other conditions. I had a 16-year-old patient that I think about a lot that actually had pain in his legs and had a tic disorder, like a muscle spasm. And after we were able to start hormone therapy, these things went away. He was in so much mental anguish from not being able to live his life the way he needed to that he actually had somatic pain and spasms and wasn't able to function in school. That child is now 19 years old and thriving in college, studying theater. He has no regrets, just joy and excitement for his future. Transgender patients often will tell me about some of their earlier memories, 4 or 5 years old, when they already questioned their gender.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. We're quite a few seconds past a lot of time. Is there maybe one more point you would like to make?
Sure. I would just say, today I am pleading for the lives of my patients. So please listen to them, not me or any of the people you've heard from so far. Listen to the actual people who have gone through this.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have a question too. This phrase, gender dysphoria, I mean, I've lived a little while, and it's been fairly new, a recent term, at least for me. So I just wanted to ask you, how long has that been a diagnosis? How long has it been around?
Yeah, I think the actual diagnosis of gender dysphoria has not been around very long because historically we didn't recognize what these patients were going through.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions for Senator Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doctor, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony. If I heard you correctly, you said in your testimony that you do not refer patients for surgery.
When they are under 18.
So why is that?
Because that's against the medical guidelines. So the only treatment that someone might be recommended to get, if it's appropriate, would be medication under 18.
So would it be fair to say that it's against medical guidelines to refer a child under the age of 18 for this kind of surgery because you're forever altering their body and they may not have been cognitively developed enough to where they can realize the gravity of the decision that's being made?
No, I think that the main reason that there's a distinction there is because of what puberty is, okay? So during puberty, we have changes to our body that can be permanent. And so for a child who truly does have gender dysphoria, then for us not to be able to offer them medication that could halt puberty so that they can develop a plan with their families and their medical team, that is the distinction. Surgery could be done later, it's true, and that's perfectly reasonable. But when kids go through puberty, we can't go back on that. So to miss the opportunity to give them that is the distinction.
In these drugs that you're willing to prescribe or consider for kids under the age of 18 are cross-sex hormones, if I understood you correctly.
There's 2 different kinds of medications. So there's puberty blockers, which can postpone or halt puberty temporarily or as long as they're on them. And then there are hormones that are sometimes part of a medical plan, not always.
And you don't have a problem with those hormones being administered to children under the age of 18 in certain circumstances?
Because of the benefits that they cause, that's how we do it. So there are risks with every medical treatment, and that is what we talk about ad nauseum with parents and children and the family.
So, doctor, I don't know if you've talked to some of the same people that I've talked to, but I've talked to individuals that have been exposed both to surgery and these types of drugs under the age of 18. There are individuals that will tell you that the drugs actually were harder on them than the surgeries because the drugs affected their entire body.
I have hundreds of patients that I've talked with, and I've never heard stories like that. So I've spoken to different people, I suppose.
Well, I guess we haven't been speaking to the same people.
Right.
Thank you for taking my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Yeah.
you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Donovan, thank you for being with us this morning, and thank you for sharing your background. One of the things that struck me is when you were talking about decisions that are made, that you alone as a physician aren't making these decisions unilaterally. You spoke a little bit about that multidisciplinary team. Can you speak to a little bit, you said that typically there are some mental health professionals that are brought in as part of this decision-making process?
Yes, yeah. This is never a unilateral decision by any means. We have at least 2 mental health care providers that evaluate the patient over the course of several months to years. And if at any point any person in the family or the medical team has any qualms about this being the right plan for the patient, we don't pursue it. This is, I think, the idea that kids are being rushed through this process is really not true. You may not believe it, but I'm actually a minimalist when it comes to medication. I really much prefer to counsel my patients about other ways of treating any kind of condition, whether it be a blood pressure medicine or hormone therapy. But we have to recognize that there are kids who need this, even if it's a small group.
And the process that you laid out that you all go through is supported by which medical organizations?
So several, but I would say probably the most poignant would be the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I don't know any other issue that we don't take them as one of the paramount resources for information for kids' medical care.
Okay. May I ask, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you've practiced medicine for how many years in Missouri?
I think so. Not since
I can do some
2018.
math here,
However
so-
many that is.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
so can you just share some changes that you have seen and how it's impacted your patients before the Missouri General Assembly passed the statute that we currently have in law that affects how you're able to treat and work with your patients?
Yeah. Well, I think that it puts undue burden on patients who are already in a group that is discriminated against to begin with. It makes it much harder for them to access care. And to be honest, we field communications with our patients every day that are just in terror of losing access and being persecuted for just who they are. So basically it just puts tons of burden on the clinic and the patients to be able to get them what they need.
One of the things that happened during the negotiations is that a sunset was put on these provisions so that we would have some time to unpack but truly some of the metrics in what has, how state law impacts the work of medical professionals, but most importantly, the health outcomes and well-being of those who are impacted by this law. And so if you may, I know we are short on time, but one of the things I'm really wanting to dig into is using this period of time while we have the sunset to really understand what our, again, what statute and what those consequences are for folks who are on the front line. And so if you, I appreciate your testimony. I know, again, we're short on time, but if you could help us unpack that a little bit more with any data that you have, I think I would really appreciate seeing that. And again, just hoping that it gives us pause before we proceed with anything else.
Yes, no, I'd love to provide more literature, which I can provide. And I think that is overall the best point that we can make today is this should not be a rushed decision. You know, this is incredibly nuanced and important. And so we've spoken already about how rushed the day is because of snowstorms and other things. So there's no reason to stop this process today. We need to learn more and be able to discuss this more and hear from more people who are affected by it.
Thank you.
Senator Lewis.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Just a couple questions here. So I think something that's, so we haven't met, so nice to see you. I'm a
Nice
nurse
to
by
meet you.
background, and something that I've seen, throughout my time in the building here is, just really trying to communicate that healthcare is fluid. It's always evolving. And I think sometimes I find it very frightening when we put state law and not allow you to do your job and treat your patients. It sounds like you have an extensive practice and thoroughly vet your kids. I think that, like, with this type of, with this type of treatment, it's, when we're talking about pediatrics, I mean, I'm just looking at, like, other types of treatment, like obesity, for example. With kids, we're going to go through psychological evaluations and medications, not rush to surgery. There's just certain ways to take care of kids, and I think that, sometimes with this stuff, I think it's definitely an overreach and a disadvantage for our healthcare providers not able to treat your patients. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that is a really important point, that this is an incredibly nuanced thing, and to make it flatly illegal does not hit the mark. We're going to miss a lot of patients that need care. A much more interesting conversation could be, how do we make more people comfortable with the idea that some people will need treatment? That would be an interesting conversation to have. How can we improve the standards of care if that's a concern for people in this panel? But to make it flatly illegal denies care to people who really need it.
Right, I agree. And I think something that I've been really concerned about is, the shortage of healthcare providers we have in the state of Missouri. The majority of counties are healthcare deserts, and laws like this, from what I'm hearing from folks back home, that our healthcare providers will leave the state because they're not able to do their jobs. And when we put these sort of restrictions on you and you have to call your attorney before treating a patient, we're just kind of shooting ourselves in the foot and further adding to the healthcare deserts here in the state.
Yeah, and I think it's just important for me to recognize that everyone in this room cares about the health of kids. We all can agree on that. I think this time would be better spent discussing the nuances of how to provide that care safely, not making things completely illegal for no one to be able to access.
Agree. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Senator Nicola?
Doctor, pardon me if you've already answered these. I'm just for clarity's sake. You said you've been practicing since 2018. Is that correct?
So I did my residency from 2015 to 2018. So whichever you can consider, if I was a resident, if that was considered practice or not.
Okay. And then you said you have, in answer to Senator Hudson's questions, you have talked with hundreds of these patients with
Yes.
gender dysphoria. So is that like your exclusive practice?
No, by no means. I take care of the full spectrum of people that live within about 2 hours of St. Louis.
Okay. And then is your practice, do you have a private practice? Do you work for a physician's group, a hospital, a university?
It's a community practice, so there's 4 physicians and 2 nurse practitioners who are like the medical providers.
Yeah.
And
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Of course. Yeah. Senator Hudson.
Doctor, just real quickly, I want to clarify something. These kind of drugs and surgery, of course, is illegal in Missouri under the SAFE Act now. Are you referring kids to other states for these drugs?
No, I am counseling them at my office and trying to provide them just with moral support, frankly, and also, trying to get them in to see mental health care providers also for more support until we learn more.
So you're currently not doing any referrals that would be in opposition to what the SAFE Act, Missouri law currently is?
No.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Make sure you leave your witness forms.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. We'll take one more person in opposition to Senate Bill 26.
Good morning, y'all. My name is Kat Rose. I am a real, live transgender person, and I came here from St. Louis to tell you why we all, independent of party or ideology, should oppose Senate Bills 26 and 75. Hormone replacement therapy, referred to in these bills as cross-sex hormones, is the single greatest medical treatment I have ever received. I am a woman immutably and unchangeably, and living with the correct sex hormone, estrogen, as my dominant sex hormone, has allowed my mind and body to develop in ways that have finally allowed me to be me. Since starting HRT, I have become more confident. I am so much happier with my body. And where before, even the happiest moments of my life were tinged with a bitter aftertaste, now, even the saddest and most painful moments of my life have a hint of sweetness and hope. I have become someone who supports her community, who inspires others to do the same. I have become someone I am proud to be in my entirety. Estrogen itself didn't make these changes happen. I did. Estrogen simply freed me of living in the wrong body and with the wrong hormone. The rest was what I did with that freedom. My only regret regarding gender-affirming healthcare is that I couldn't start it earlier to escape a testosterone-based puberty and the often irreversible changes that come with it. Before estrogen was ever prescribed to trans people, it was prescribed to menopausal women and to other women with low levels of endogenous estrogen, a group which, I will note, includes trans women. Our healthcare is your healthcare. Every medication trans people receive is also prescribed to cisgender people. It is the job of trained medical professionals, not legislators, to evaluate whether these treatments are safe and effective. And every major medical and mental health association supports their use as the only effective treatment for gender dysphoria. Allow Missouri transgender youth and their families the freedom to seek out this life-saving care. No matter your party or caucus, every one of you should see how this legislative overreach threatens all of our freedoms and sets a dangerous precedent of government power. Don't tread on me and don't tread on Missouri's trans youth. Vote these bills down.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Senator.
I want to thank you so much for your testimony, but can you tell me, maybe you said this, how old were you when you started HRT?
When I started HRT, I was 24.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So do you understand that this is for minors only?
Yes, and I addressed that in my statement that my only regret regarding gender-affirming care is that I could not start it earlier due to, as several people have mentioned, the often irreversible consequences of it.
So you haven't had to experience what it feels like to begin that early, at an earlier age and then decide later that you don't want to do that?
Thank you so much for the question. I would say that I have the experience of watching my body change irreversibly in ways that were incorrect, seeing my body endure changes from testosterone and having to live with the knowledge that I would have to deal with those changes for the rest of my life.
Thank you for your comments. Any other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank you for being here, for your bravery. I don't know if there's any other topic that we discuss that puts people and all of their existence just right out there at the witness stand. And I am so grateful for you all. And I also want to say I'm so grateful for Promo. I'm somebody who didn't know a lot about things. When I got into the legislature, recognizing that we're making laws, that I really have to understand the impact. And some comments were made about an organization today, and I just want to thank Promo, all the allies and advocates that continue to come here year after year to share your stories and share just a little bit of your humanity with us. And I appreciate your bravery and strength.
Thank you. We appreciate you too.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Senator Lewis.
Thank you. I just want to point out what you said about don't tread on me. I think that's really important because it's like, you know, in your circumstances, you know, and I also want to just mention that, you know, I think a lot of folks in this room believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And is that for all, or is it only for a certain, you know, type of person? So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
With no more questions, Senator Moon, do you have any other comments you want to add? Okay. Are there any questions for the senator before we move on? All right. Thank you.